Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Comic Arts Workshop. My name is Ramon Gill. I am the organizer. We have been doing this since 2017. And tonight we have a very special guest, Stephanie Williams, who's a writer, whom I met at the Wellsboro Comic Con a few weeks ago. And I got really excited to bring her in. Um, and we get our fair share of writers, but usually it's like editors and artists. But it's nice to see a writer in here as well. So anyways, I will let Stephanie introduce herself by way of the first question, which is Stephanie. Well, before you answer the first question, could you please tell us a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yes. Right now I am working on some more My Little Pony and my first two of my first creator-owned series and Absolute Power Task Force 7 issue 6 just came out today. That is the tie-in to the DC event Absolute Power.
What's the audience for those creator owned ones?
So for the creator own, I'm thinking anywhere from, a high school on up, even middle grade. I wanted it to be something that pretty much anyone could pick up if possible. For that's for one of them. The second one is more adult leaning.
Got it. Obviously, the My Little Pony is aimed
Yeah.
for is that middle grade or elementary or probably
Uh
elementary, right?
so like yeah, middle grade, 8 to 12.
Got it. Okay. So Stephanie, tell us, how did you come upon comics? I know you have a very interesting path to comics, but let's have you tell it.
Yeah, so I first got into comics via arcade games. So there was a laundromat that we would sometimes frequent, and they had two arcade games. It was Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, and then also it was like X-Men versus Capcom, one of those games, but whichever one it was, Storm, where she repeatedly says Typhoon when you use one of her special attacks. Uh, I don't know, like I just gravitated towards that game and I always used Storm. And I didn't make the connection that there was a TV show, X-Men 92, that was airing that was sometimes come on like after school or on Saturdays. So I started watching that and then eventually started picking up comics. The very first I think Marvel comic I read, it wasn't an X-Men comic, it was an Avengers comic. So in that one, Crystal, the Black Knight, and Cersei have like this, you know, throuple going on, and Vision has been like reset. So he's the White Vision. And I just thought it was very dramatic and it made me think of the soap operas that my mother and my grandmother loved to watch. I was like, oh, so this is very similar. They're just superheroes. So that is kind of what got me into wanting to read more stories like that. And also the X-Men animated series is pretty dramatic too.
Now, a lot of people will play video games or watch the TV show, but not all of them will pick up the comic book and
Mhm.
start reading it. So what was it about comics that really got you interested?
So I was already an avid reader anyway. So comics just felt like, okay, well, this is something else that I would read. I think it was really actually probably more so the Archie comics that really sold me on
Oh,
I
really?
guess my love of comics. Yeah, because the Archie digests were like right up at at like the checkout aisle at the grocery store where I lived and were pretty much anywhere. And like those were easier to just like put on the conveyor belt last minute.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I just kind of fell in love with them that way. Like I still have like 7 shoe boxes full of like those Archie digest comics.
Are you how old were you when you started reading the comics?
Probably like maybe 9 or 10.
Okay, so you are a pretty prolific reader
Yeah.
at a young age. Now, but you so you liked reading comics, but your training was not in writing comics. So what was it?
No, it was research science. So originally, I got my degree in biology with a minor in biochem, and originally thought I wanted to go to medical school, but um, I think I just fell more in love with the research part of things. So then I learned about an MD PhD program, and after graduating and working for a year as an electron microscopist, I thought I would go back to school to, pursue that. And things didn't work out. I took the MCAT, I took everything, but I don't know, like it just alignment just wasn't there. And I'm glad that it wasn't, because that clearly was not the path that I was meant to go on. So I went back to my job as an electron microscopist and worked that for an additional 6 years. And one, maybe the last 2 years, I would freelance, do some freelance journalism on the side. And that's where I really started to hone my voice outside of just writing scientific stuff. And eventually started making my own web comics and had a Kickstarter that ended up being successful, which I wasn't expecting, for this comic called Living Heroes that I did with the artist Aaron O'Neill Jones. And the next thing I knew, I got an email from an editor at Marvel asking me would I be interested in participating in Marvel Voices Legacy, for like a 2-page Monica Rambeau story. And the rest is kind of history. Like after that came out, I knew that I wanted to do more. So I had to like just continue to either put out my own stuff or, hopefully get in contact with more editors. And thankfully, like the week that that comic came out, I spoke to the editor at DC about possibly writing some Amazons. And next thing I knew, I was doing Nubia.
Now, so with the Amazons, you actually, you had a conversation with the editor that you worked with about doing something. So in essence, you pitched the story to them, or you pitched yourself to them, right?
No, no. So actually what ended up happening is a good friend of mine, Vita Ayala, who I had interviewed a while back when I had a podcast for their book The Wilds, which I was just obsessed with and I loved. After the interview, we kind of stayed in touch and would just, often talk. And they knew that I was interested in writing comics well before I actually started writing them. So they were the ones to suggest me for the job. And then from there, that's kind of how the ball got rolling. So DC already had an idea what they wanted to do for Nubia. They just needed somebody to come up with a coherent story, but there were some pieces that they wanted to establish, like, changing her origin story, and also just really cementing her status in the DC universe, aside from her being previously known as the Black Wonder Woman or just Diana's Black sister. So, but some of that information from there went on to kind of fashion this story, and of course get their approval for what to do with this character in the first series.
Now, so that was your one of your first works for licensed works for the big two. And how did you get more work from them afterwards?
I made sure to meet my deadlines and stay as communicative as possible. And again, remembering that comics is a collaborative effort, I did what I could to make sure that I was hopefully making it like working with me was, if not an enjoyable time, at least like you weren't trying to bang your head on the wall. So I'm pretty sure that was part of it. um and then also I would get feedback from the editor like, hey, like, from the notes that I gave you on issue 1, I see that you're now applying them to like issue 2 and on. So I was showing the growth that was needed to, say, hey, let's give her some more work. And that's how Nubia Coordination Special came, and then the second series, because that wasn't guaranteed. It was just kind of based on my performance.
Now, that's actually a very good way of looking at or working in the industry. Hear stories, and I've worked with people,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't take feedback very well, or they're
Mm-hmm.
difficult to work with. Um, Now, is this something you gleaned from interviewing people? Is this something you learned in your previous career? How did you figure out that that's the formula? Be nice, be on time, be good to work with, because a lot of people don't understand that when they start out.
Yeah, I mean, definitely from my previous career, but I would even take it all the way back to one of my earliest jobs when I was like a senior in high school, which was as a waitress. And from there, like if you wanted tips, then,
Nice.
one, of course, do your job, but also to just kind of show up and give your best. And I've always applied that to everything I've done, especially like working in research. Like you are dealing with other folks with big egos, and sometimes the criticism, the criticism that you receive is warranted. Other times it's not, and someone is just your PI is having a bad day and taking it out on you. So, learning how to navigate just kind of corporate and academic life definitely helped me when it came to writing comics professionally. It's not the exact same, but some of the same components, professionalism and all of that is still, still applies.
Well, I would say that that applies in a lot of industries, but not
Yeah.
everybody gets it. So I
Yeah.
commend you for being insightful enough to get that,
Mhm. Yeah.
bring it with you into this industry. Um, but before you were writing the comic book stories, you were doing comics history.
Yeah.
So can you tell us how that came about?
Absolutely. So that actually came out of a podcast that I used to do called Misty Knight's Uninformed Afro. We focus on Black superheroines and characters in comics and just kind of did like this historical look at their existence. So stuff, of course, that was canon to the comics, but also anything relevant to what was going on at the time when those characters were created or those stories were written. So I think we had done the second season and got invited to the Kennedy Arts Center for an art summit in DC, and that was pretty huge. I wasn't expecting that.
That's
Uh, yeah, and then the podcast kind of just fell to the wayside, and I had all of this research for the following season, and I didn't know what to do with it. And someone had suggested that maybe I talk to an editor at Sci-Fi. So I, I wrote my very first pitch, and I look at it to this day, and it's hideous. I would never pitch like that again, but I didn't know. But thankfully, the editor knew that I was kind of new at this, but thought that I would be able to, bring something different, new, fresh ideas. So my very first piece was the evolution of the Dora Milaje from comics to movies, because Black Panther had came out that year, and yeah, like they loved it. And this is for Sci-Fi Fangirls. The next thing I knew, they were asking me to pitch more, and I became a pretty much a regular contributor.
nice, nice.
Yeah.
A lot of it's also being in the right place in the right time, it seems.
Absolutely. I mean, so much of this is that like one, of course, doing the work, but also I would be remiss if I said that luck wasn't a part of this, because you could be doing the work, and if the quote unquote right person doesn't see it, then you're still doing the work. It's still valid. But sometimes you just need the right person to see it.
Now, one of the questions we get a lot
Mm-hmm.
in this workshop is how do you find collaborators, and not just finding them, but finding collaborators that are good collaborators, people
Yeah.
to work with. So,
Yeah, so with my first webcomic, Parenthood Activate, the artist that I reached out to, her name is Sarah Macklin, and I had already had previous, just chats and whatnot about with her online. We were mutuals, and we were supposed to do another project for the podcast. She was gonna like create some of the promo art, but again, when that podcast fell through, so did that. So I knew that I always wanted to work with her. So I circled back and I said, "Hey, would you be interested in like one page sequential art stories?" And like this is the premise, what I'm thinking. So it was like Rugrats, but from a parent's perspective, and she was down. So she put together some of like the character sketches, and I loved them, and we just kind of went from there. Now for the second webcomic series that I had called But What If Though, that was one where in hindsight, I don't know if I was that smart, but now it seems like it. But I got to work with several different artists because I kind of treated that like a rotating thing. One that would give me the chance to tell different stories and play to the strengths of different artists that I reached out to, but also it just helped me prepare to try get better at writing scripts for anyone. Folks that I work with a lot, I can get more specific and shorthanded, but I always approach writing a script as though like I haven't met this person before, but I know they have something artistically, storytelling wise that they want to bring. So let me leave enough room for them to be able to do that. And I found these artists at the time all on Twitter. So it came from different hashtags like Portfolio Day, Drawing While Black. I think there was even one that Kelly Sue DeConnick had going on for women and non-binary folks. So searching those hashtags and just looking at the art and just seeing if it was a fit for whatever story I was going to tell would have me reach out to artists and kind of see if they were into it. If they were, great. If not, that was okay too. And that just kind of again like exposed me to a lot of working styles, and not just like difference in artistic what they brought, but just working styles, communication, even contracts, because that was something too, to make sure that um you know it's a professional, treating it like a professional thing and making sure that contracts are there and compensation is what it needs to be.
Do you still rely on, I guess, Twitter now X, or are you able to find collaborators other ways now?
So now it's usually the publisher that ends up finding the collaborators. There has been instances where I've worked with someone before and I like would like to work with them again, so I'll make the suggestion. But about 70% of the time, the editors are finding basically filling like roles. So they'll
Okay.
find someone who they think best fits the story.
You mentioned earlier that you in an effort to be very professional about it is that you deal with the contracts as well.
Mhm.
So for your creator owned stuff, are those work for hire, or do they are they part owners of the intellectual property?
So for the two creator owns, there are part owners because I'm going through another publisher because Kickstarter, I went through that. And for me personally, I just don't want to deal with printing and marketing, which I still do anyway, but all of the other stuff, that the nitty gritty that goes into putting out your own work. So they own a small percentage, and then of course once your advance is paid back, then you of course get a much higher percentage of whatever those sales are. So um both companies, the editors I worked with previously, so when they moved and went to greener pastures, they reached out to me and said, hey, you got any original works? And I thankfully had a few of them ready to go.
Nice. So you've worked on licensed characters and you've worked on creator owned stuff. How do they compare?
um they both feel the same and very different at the same time. For licensed stuff, of course, like you do have room for creativity, but again, it's someone else's thing. And if for instance there's an event going on and you're writing a miniseries that happens to be tied to the event, like there's certain things that you got to follow story wise, making sure that you're staying in alignment enough for a character's canon. Because like sure you could do different things, but you just don't want to be writing somebody completely different than they've ever been unless it's like an Elseworld story. And then with creator own, like you're building this world, these characters from the ground up. So it's like this free for all. So in that, having a clear idea of what it is that you want to do, but still kind of leaving room to like wiggle things, make wiggle room if the story changes a little bit as you're working on it. That part has been both fun and scary because it's like, okay, so when do you pump the brakes? When do you reel it back in? Or like when do you push it some more? So that's been interesting for me, just and my growth as a writer so far, and like applying everything that I've learned up until this point while working for other folks and playing in other sandboxes, and like what do I want to apply to how I go about creating my world and storytelling and trying to figure out a good balance between the two.
If money wasn't an issue, do you prefer the creator owned stuff or the licensed stuff?
I would prefer the creator own stuff.
Um, Now one of your very early works was about parenthood. It's
Hmm.
Parenthood Activate, right?
Yes.
Um, we don't see, even though I'm sure a lot of writers take from their personal life and include it in their stories. You don't see a lot of creators who focus around parenthood. So how
Hmm.
did that come about for you?
That's just something that so my son is the biggest reason why I ended up like heading towards this major career shift. And because of that, I started, I think like maybe 3 months or so after having him, I started blogging and I would talk about what, my experiences was, first time mom and just kind of navigating that. But in doing that, I would, talk about something like Terminator with Sarah Connor and Alien with Ripley and just other mothers throughout genre that I either like, just really loved or found some similarities to. So it just made sense that for my very first, creator owned comic, I would do the same thing. But this time I get to, just visually share with folks the stories that I would probably share online or with a friend.
So the was this a web comic or was this a
It was a
blog?
it was a web comic. But I'm
Okay.
saying from my earlier days when I was blogging,
Oh, got it.
yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
got it. Um, Now another question we get a lot of is, um, and we already talked about some of the things that you brought into this career. But
Mhm.
what are some qualities that you think a creator needs to make it in this industry?
Um, and I feel like this applies anywhere but a thick skin. And I don't mean a thick skin as in like you should be able to like, people could say really terrible things to you and they just bounce right off. No. I mean a thick skin when it comes to of course taking critique, but also standing up for yourself because, you know, sometimes the editor gives a suggestion that is in line with what you're trying to do and they're massaging the story, but other times it comes to discerning whether or not someone is trying to write this thing for you or allowing you to do what you need to do. And then of course, because we live in an age of digital everything, even if you don't go looking for stuff, sometimes it's still going to find you. And some of it's good and it's nice and it makes you feel great. And other is not so nice and it doesn't make you feel great. So a thick skin obviously is really important because you're putting your most vulnerable self out into the world through your work. And again, like, sometimes the good stuff finds you, but the bad stuff does too. And then of course, figuring out a routine because I know for me personally, I would try to write whenever I felt inspired or I had a muse, but deadlines don't care about that. So coming up with a routine that can get me in a working creative mode so that I can, do what I have to do before it's time. And then if I miss a deadline or if I know that I might miss a deadline, just making sure that I let my editors know as soon as I possibly can because life happens. And like it's just life happens, or sometimes like it's you just don't have it. So as long as you let people know as soon as you can instead of ghosting them, 9 times out of 10, it's gonna be it like it's okay.
And you said something that was very interesting. You said also being able to stand up for yourself.
Yes.
Now, um, the comic industry has a lot of people who really want to get into it, right?
Hmm.
And we meet them all the time. People whose dreams are to be a comic book artist or comic book writer,
Hmm.
and 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 I think what happens a lot with a lot of people who really want so badly is they'll take whatever work they can get,
Hmm.
and that might mean just saying yes to anything
Hmm.
and maybe not standing up for yourself.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you didn't have that problem. Is it because you
Well,
were you were coming from another career that you thought you could always go back to, so you didn't have to worry about whether or not it's gonna work out or not? Or
no, so funny enough, I did not want to go back at all. So for me, saying yes to a lot of things was it wasn't even necessarily out of desperation. It was I knew if I let the momentum slow down, then there was a chance that I could be forgotten or something. Like I just feel like the way that this industry works, and maybe it's always worked this way, but like if you can't really rest on your laurels because you know someone might read your book that you wrote 2 3 years ago and might think that it's brilliant, but if you haven't done anything else since then, the likelihood of them calling you up and seeing that you've been not doing anything is slim to none. So for me, saying yes initially was just trying to make sure that I was one, getting all the practice that I could, because you can only get better with the more things that you do. But also making sure that my name was like continuously out there. So even if it wasn't IP work, I would continue to put my own thing out there with both those web comics. Now I say no with a lot more conviction and without second guessing, because you're right. Because a lot of folks are so desperate to be in this, like you will say yes to a thing that you probably should have said no to. And now you've had this terrible, frustrating experience. You're feeling discouraged and you're kind of like, maybe comics isn't for me. And that might not actually be true. It might be that that actual thing, that opportunity was not for you. And I always hate when I hear those stories, and I always hope that those people like find a way to feel re-inspired, and get that bad taste out of their mouth for that really terrible experience. Because, it's not fun making comics and not having a good time.
Yeah, but I get the feeling that even in those early days,
Hmm.
you had a confidence about you,
Yeah.
and it's not that it's rare, but I wouldn't say that it's common. So where does that stem from? Where do you think that comes from?
I think that is just something that was, I don't know, maybe since like the second grade. And the only reason why I bring that up is because like my parents were like really adamant about like do well on your spelling test, because they knew I was such a voracious reader. So like I've been exposed to a lot of words, and I remember maybe it was the second or third week into school, and we got our very first spelling test, and I think I got like 70% or something. And they weren't happy because they knew that I could do better than that, because they tested me, the Wednesday and Thursday before, and I did very well. And, the conversation was like, hey, like, we know that you can do this. Like, what was it? And I pretty much spoke about a lack of confidence that I was feeling. And I don't know what it was about that conversation with my parents that day, but they were just so reaffirming that, hey, we know you can do this, we've seen you do it, but you have to believe that you can, right? So from there I just always took that, and no matter what I was doing, like it was either fake it till you make it and you believe that you could do it, or to just come in with this attitude that, hey, I'm going to get the job done. Because for writing I've definitely needed that, because it's scary to get in your head and think that, I know for me, like when I think I have writer's block, it's because I'm frustrated because I don't know how to start something or solve a problem, or I can't work something out in the outline, and I have to look back and say, hey, like you've done all these other stories previously, obviously you'll figure it out, and you need to be confident that you'll figure it out. Like you wouldn't have this resume of work if you couldn't figure it out. So the confidence just has to be there. I mean, same thing as science, definitely the confidence has to be there, because again, you're dealing with people with big egos.
How old were you when you got that 70% on the test?
If I was in second grade, so it's
You-
probably 7 or 8.
Maybe 8 or 9.
Yeah, so one of the two. So,
That's amazing that at that age you were able to tell your parents that I have this. I don't know. You could talk about lacking confidence. That's pretty emotionally a high EQ, as they say.
yes, and it's so funny. Same thing with my son right now, and he is 8 going on 9, and we literally just had this similar conversation after they tested them on to see where they were reading wise at the beginning of the year, so they could test again at the end. And he ended up testing like just I think like a point or two off from being at third grade level. And he was kind of upset about that. I'm like, you just started third grade, like you'll be there and I know that you're a great reader. He bought a Mario history book for like at the Scholastic Book Fair way back when he was like in kindergarten. So he reads. But you know, just the same thing,
Great.
reaffirming like, hey, you can do this. Like I've seen you do it. You just have to believe that you can. Also, you just started third grade. Like you'll be past that level by the time school is over.
Is he an avid reader because
Yes.
of or in spite of graphic novels?
He is a no, so you know what made him a avid reader? It was role-playing games. So he really liked Mario, Paper Mario because of me, and like you gotta read the what's going on. So that's actually what got him determined to figure out reading.
Mhm.
And now graphic novels like Dog Man, Cat Kid, all that.
I'm gonna ask one more question. I'm gonna open it up to the audience. We don't have as
Okay.
many people tonight for some reason. I made a mistake of not sending out the link as early as I usually do, but I'm hoping people. So, anyways, here's my question. Do you have a dream project or an IP character you would still love to work with?
Uh Yes, and I would say that that is Vixen for DC Comics. I've Justice League Unlimited. I watched a ton of and got a bunch of exposure to her through that, and of course, finally like reading her comics. I would just love to add to her lore.
Right. It's always nice to pick up one of the less used characters
Hmm.
and try to build something out of that.
Absolutely.
So let me open up to the audience. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I got one.
Char, we'll go to you after Greg.
Are you planning to use AI in your work?
Am I using AI in my work?
Well, are you planning to use
Oh,
AI in your work?
no, no, not at all. I mean, outside of like Grammarly when I'm like trying to check my emails and make sure my comments are in the right place for like pitches
Yeah.
and stuff, that, but as far as like a chat or Claude,
Yeah, I heard some people are really mad at AI because it's taking over, especially Yami or Sonoris, and because it's taking over their job.
yeah, I've seen some stuff with like AI art, and of course, I am definitely against that because it's stealing work from artists who could be doing that. And again, comics is a collaborative thing, so I don't know, like I would think that you will hopefully want to work with like you know other fellow artists, editors, letterers, colorists, all of that. Oh, I think you're still muted.
Thanks for that question, Char. So we'll go to Greg.
Hey, how you doing, Stephanie? We're technically working together currently under IDW. So
Yeah. Oh, it's nice to
yeah,
finally meet you. I put a name.
likewise, likewise.
Yes, yes.
Pleasure to meet you. Yeah. So my question is, what do you look for in a collaborator? What's your expectations, or what are your wants out of them specifically?
Someone who's gonna tell me what they want to do. Like we're here to have a good time together. Had I had a chance to, I would have reached out to you before I wrote the script, but I had no idea who was going to work on it. But I usually try to reach out to artists and say, hey, is there something that you want to draw, or like is there something you're currently doing you want to do more of, that type of thing. But you know, just someone who wants to bounce ideas off of each other, and again, like, you know, make this comic making process as fun as possible.
Definitely look forward to hopefully having you realize the script where this is making it worth your while. I guess start. Yeah.
Oh, it's no doubt those layouts that you turned in were phenomenal. So
Uh,
I can't wait to see the finished product.
yeah. You gonna be at New York Comic Con?
No, not this year.
Not this year. All right.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
I'll be at Baltimore and LA.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
cool.
Uh,
We'll
So
meet up soon.
you guys are literally working on the same project right now?
Yeah.
Ah,
We're working on an IDW project right now.
congrats, Greg. That's awesome. Um, any other questions? Aisha?
Can I go?
Yes, go ahead,
Yeah.
Aisha.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Um, Hi, I'm an editor and I'm learning about editing comics
Mm-hmm.
these days. So you're the writer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what what I'd like to ask you is, what would you look for in an editor, or what do you expect from an editor when you give them your script?
So for them to let me know if my pacing is what it needs to be, because comics is again such a visual medium, so that uh the way that I'm presenting the panels to the artist and both the editor, that makes sense as far as like story flow. Also making sure that I am being true to the character if it's an IP thing when it comes to dialogue. And then also, pointing out any weaknesses that might be in my story, any suggestions to make it stronger. I'm always like open to hear that from an editor. So I guess not well, sort of similar to the way that editor would go about doing the same thing for a prose situation, but I guess now you're taking consideration actual page layouts from like my script, and again, if the story flow is there, page turns are there, so that is uh, you read a comic, of course, from right to left, and making sure that that last panel on that left page is something that makes the reader or even yourself want to turn to the next page and continue reading. And page turns can even get even more specific to panel. Again, are you wanting to follow the action from left to, I mean, from left to right?
And another question is, have you ever found that sometimes once the artwork is done, you need to change up the script part again?
Yes. You are not writing a comic until it is printed. That has been beaten to my head, and I will
I like
never
that. I like that.
forget. Yes. And a lot of times, that's because, again, because it's a visual medium, the artist has done something where I don't need the character to say it anymore. Or maybe the face, the emotions in the face, or just the scene itself calls for a little bit more punch in the dialogue, or to bring it down some. So I'm always changing like what I have. Also, sometimes you see like there's too many bubbles on the page and you don't want to cover up all that art. So I start to get a little bit more conservative with what I have.
Yeah, because obviously when you're writing it, you're visualizing it already.
Yes.
But once it's actually come into the color, into even if it's just ink and you have the dialogue bubbles there, I have found that sometimes there's some extra wording that it doesn't really need to be there. But then, how does that affect your drawing, the layout? I mean, I'm sure you must have to delete panels for that.
No, so actually, so they'll do, I get something called the lettering pass, and that's once they put the actual word balloons, narration boxes with all the dialogue there. And I'll usually get that sent to me in a PDF, and I'll be able to go
Okay.
through use Adobe to either answer any queries that editors might have, or myself makes it say highlight a thing and say, hey, actually change this dialogue to this, or you can cut this entire piece of dialogue, is not needed. So that's the way that I've been going about kind of making those suggestions and changes, or answering feedback from editors. I have had it in the past where that's done like in a separate email, but I'm personally not a big fan of that, because it's kind of hard to I feel
Sync
like
them
things get
together.
lost. Yeah, and things kind of get
Yeah.
lost in translation when you're looking at two different docs instead of everything on the same page.
All right. And my last question is this: what's the worst experience you've had with an editor?
Ooh. One who basically could have just wrote the thing themselves.
What? The
Yeah,
one who
like,
think they can write themselves?
yeah, well, not that they think that they can write themselves. Like, you could tell they wanted to like write this thing, so
Oh,
it almost feels as
too much
though
control.
too
trying
much
to control this.
control.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, all right.
and not really being I guess really not honing into like what my voice is. Because editors that I love to work with and I work with frequently, because now we have that rapport, they know what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, and like what suggestions will open up the story for in a way that I hadn't thought about, or they can see kind of what I was trying to do but just couldn't massage all the way out in the first or second draft. But yeah, just someone who it just sounds like, hey, I want to write this thing, so I'm gonna my notes are gonna pretty much look like that.
Uh, who's your favorite editor?
My favorite. I don't want to say favorites, but I've spoken about this publicly, but my editor, Brittany Holzer on Nubia and a lot of other DC projects that I've worked on. She's my very first like editor on a long run thing. I got very spoiled because her notes were just always so good. She would of course praise the things that were good, and then the things that either need to be changed, again, like suggestions here and there, or say, hey, like, I see what you're doing, but my suggestion would be maybe think of it this way. Like, she really helped me one, just get stronger as a storyteller, but also better at like just reading editor notes too, because she made them so clear and concise. Because even when I have a bad editor, I'm able to like think back and say, well, what would Brittany do?
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ashia. Aisha, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
Aisha.
okay. I'm gonna go a little bit off the cuff here.
Uh-huh.
Obviously the My Little Pony is for a very young audience, and Nubia, I'm assuming, is for like teens and young adults,
Uh-huh.
right? But when you go into like Marvel and DC traditional direct market superhero comic books, it tends to be for older readers, right?
Yeah, which
So my question to you is the projects that you work on, is that something you think about, like which audience you want to write for, or is it just what comes down the pike?
what comes down the pike. But I guess when I am writing, even for superhero stuff, because you're right, like that does tend to be like more towards an adult leaning audience. I just think about myself and like this 10-12-year-old kid picking up a comic. There are still elements there that I try to include, so that if a younger reader does come across this, they don't, I don't know, like they don't feel as though they're being left out. Like, I try to write my superhero comics as something that is friendly to both new and older readers. Because for me, the goal is I want you reading more comics. Even if you're not reading Marvel and DC, that's fine. I just want you to like, like fall in love with this medium and like go search other comics that might be more your jam if superhero comics aren't. So, for me, like, I'm just trying to make sure that like what's here doesn't feel too overwhelming if possible, and just feels welcoming.
Now, is that something of your initiative, or is your own initiative, or is that something that the editor tells you, well, we need to make this more accessible to
No, that's my own initiative, because that even goes way back to like my podcasting days. Both before my own personal podcast, and also Misty Knight's Uninformed Afro, where I just wanted comics to feel more accessible. Because for me, like, I just want more people reading comics. So now that I can do that with my storytelling, like, that feels even more effective.
do you think that's a factor in the kind of assignments are offered to you?
I think so, in a positive way. I know for sure, like, if there's an event going on, editors will tap me to that, because I can take whatever needs to be done and kind of run with it and still make it my own. Of course, I'm getting more middle grade work, some My Little Pony. And there's some creator owned middle grade book that I'm currently pitching, because I just love children's media, but of course, not trying to talk down to children. Like, I am a fan of Five Goes West and different children's media that of course had like difficult subject matter, but again understood that children are intelligent enough to be able to pick up on some of these more complex themes, just depending on the way that you present them.
This middle grade project you're working on, what stage is it at?
So yeah, it's in the pitching. Actually, we'll be giving it to the artists later this week so they can do some of the character sketches and see what happens.
Got it. And I'm assuming you're even going to be pitching this to the direct market publishers or to traditional publishers?
Traditional publishers.
Traditional publishers.
Mm-hmm.
Have you worked with traditional publishers? It's mainly like.
Yeah, I have. The Raven Cycle, that novel that graphic novels, that book series that I am adapting, that was with Penguin, but more specifically Vikings Children's Press. And actually one of the creator-owned projects that I have is also with another traditional publisher too. So I've been finding that one, that's where the money is, but two, that's where the money is. Traditional publishing, yeah.
So I'm not even going to ask that question. Do you have an agent?
Yes.
Okay. How did you find the agent? How did you get the agent?
So I ended up getting the agent after the graphic novel adaptation thing, because I had ended up having to handle that myself. But after that, I reached out to a friend. I was like, hey, so that was horrible to do by myself. I would love to I should have representation. So they were able to hook me up with the agent I have now, who had actually been a fan of my work prior. So that was a nice little thing. The funny part is that all the work that I've gotten since signing on with him has either come directly to me, or because it's comics, he's like, yeah, they don't pay you enough for me to take a percentage, which I've always been appreciative of. So now finally that I'm doing creator owned stuff, I'm like, hey, you're finally gonna be able to do some work for me. I'm so sorry it took this long, but that part's been great.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. I had something, but so the industry, people always forecasting the death of this or complaining about this part of the industry or that part of the industry. Is there anything that you'd like to see change in the industry, whether it be in the traditional direct market or in traditional publishing?
Both, right? And I mean, I know people have been saying this since forever, but more diversity, but I don't mean just writers and artists, but editors, marketing, all of that, that is needed. Because a lot of times, editors are the folks, scouting and bringing some of these people in. And of course, and also deciding what stories are, especially for IP work, determining what stories end up ultimately either getting the green light before the market says otherwise. So we could just use more diversity in that way. And I don't more resources for creators. Something that is better than a Kickstarter or crowdfunding in general. I don't know what that looks like, but hey, if I ever get a Shonda Rhimes level deal, then I think I'll just start my own thing, and I'm not gonna make anybody jump through any hoops. I'm like, hey, fill this out, do a raffle every 6 months, and create, and pick, I don't know, however much money I'm able to, donate to fund projects. But that is my dream, to be able to create a fund so that people can come in and make the things that they, that's on their heart to make. Because for a lot of us, it's money. We got to survive. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to make a sacrifice of, do I spend time working on this thing, or am I going to sleep so I can get up for, my 9 to 5, my 7 to 4, or whatever in the morning, or this I'm on my third 12th shift.
All right. So do you want to just be able to supply the money, or do you actually want to be like a publisher?
I don't know yet. I'm not
You
sure.
said earlier you didn't like doing all that stuff, the marketing, and so my other question would have been, how do you feel about self-publishing?
Self-publishing, Maybe sometime later I'll be open to that. But right now, I just don't even know if I have the bandwidth for it because I am juggling so much at the same time. But I hope I can get to a place where, yeah, I'm able to self-publish and even maybe start my own company, and do the thing that I didn't want to do, which is, all this marketing and stuff. But I'm doing that now. Setting up, interviews, making sure that I'm talking about the projects that I'm working on online. I know I need to start a newsletter, so bullying myself until I actually do that. But like at the at the very least, I want to be able to help people make their projects come true. So if that just means throwing a bunch of money at it, I'm okay with that. Until I'm able to be in a place, just mentally, and just a bandwidth wise to be able to maybe be more hands on.
I think that's what Annie Koyama from Koyama Press. I think she just
Yeah.
gives people money. She's not publishing anymore, but she still gives people money.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the Sarek Awards used to do, but I don't think they're doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Um. Anyways, I'll ask you. Does anybody have any more questions? Because I have one last question. I'll ask of Stephanie, and then we'll let her go. Anybody? Okay, I'm gonna ask my question then.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's a pretty simple question. So if people wanted to find your work, where can they go? Or
Uh,
find
s- So you can, of course, go to my website, whysteph.com. That's WHYSTEPH.com. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at Steph_I_Will. I do still have a Twitter or formerly or X page, but I have not tweeted since December 31st, 2023, and I will not be doing anything. Like my page will probably be locked and shut down before I, do anything with it.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing I'm disappointed about is the fact that I thought you were in New York or New York area.
No, so sorry. No. I flew all the way from Charlotte to the Rochester area. I would have been going to NYCC, but before it starts, I'll be doing my 6 con back to back, which would be LA Comic Con. And I'm on I just came back from Rose City. I have Baltimore next week, and I won't have anything left to give for NYCC. And I've done it the past 2 years, so a break. I will embrace the break.
I'm gonna be at SPX this weekend.
Oh yeah, that should be exciting.
I didn't see your name there, so I was a little bit
No,
mildly
no.
disappointed. But the reason why I am a bit disappointed is because I'm organizing Neurodiversity Comic Con in November
Sweet. Okay.
here in New York, and I was hoping and you are invited, but that would mean trekking out from. We don't have the budget to fly you and house you, so
Well, if you do it again next year, let me know ahead of time, and I'll try to budget accordingly.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll also try to figure out how we can make some accommodations for next year.
Okay.
This will be the first year, and so it'll be all one big experiment. But we do have Archie and Scholastic coming in already,
Yeah. Okay. Great.
hopefully, and Greg's coming also too.
Yes. Okay. Great.
Anyways, Stephanie, it was a pleasure getting to know you. I wish we had been able to talk in person more at Wellsburg,
Yeah.
but I'm sure I'll see you at a convention one of these days.
Oh, you absolutely will. And I'm looking forward to it.
And what I forgot to ask people to do was I forgot to show some love and give some applause to Stephanie for coming out
Oh,
tonight.
thank you.
And Steph, this has been a genuine pleasure. And I hope we get to keep in touch.
Absolutely. Yes. And please let me know when this is up and live, and I will share it everywhere I can.
We'll do. Probably give it about a week or two.
Okay. That sounds great.
Okay.
All right.
Take
It was so great meeting you, Greg.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.
All right, likewise.
All right. Bye bye.